Hello, welcome to the Bible study on Priority of Compassion, Module 3, Session 5 of Living in the Image of God by Banking Blessings Ministry. My name is Goodluck Ofebu.
Hello, I am Chibueze Obabike. We are happy to welcome you to this discussion of how laws, customs, or regulations may affect the performance of human responsibility in a call to compassion.
And I am Ijama Obabike. God creates every person to represent Him in the interaction with others.
To be for others what God would be for them if He lived with us in human form.
He provides resources to empower every person to perform the responsibilities.
Also, He blesses those that do.
Our program seeks to understand the meaning of living in the image of God, resources that God has provided to guide us, and human responsibilities and benefits of living in the image of God.
Let's dive right to learn, test and share from God's message.
In this Bible study, we discuss Christ's interactions with the Pharisees regarding the Sabbath law to understand that there should be no law, custom, or regulation against providing goods or service to alleviate the need in a call to compassion.
We will distinguish between the procurement of goods or service
and providing the procured goods or service to fulfill responsibility in a call to compassion.
The procurement of goods or service could be subject to laws, customs, and regulations.
In contrast, there should be no law, custom, or regulation against providing the procured goods or service to alleviate the need in a call to compassion.
We will discuss Christ's response to challenges by the Pharisees regarding the Sabbath law.
One challenge was about the disciples picking and eating grains from a grain field on the Sabbath.
The other challenge was about Christ healing a man with shriveled hand on the Sabbath.
Our discussion comes from Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 through 13. The first Pharisee challenge occurred while Jesus and his disciples passed through a grain field on the Sabbath.
The disciples were hungry and in need.
Therefore, they picked grains with their hands and ate.
We will refer to a Bible passage later that showed that picking grains with bare hands in another person's grain field was lawful.
However, the Pharisees accused that picking grain on the Sabbath was a violation of the Sabbath law.
In response, Jesus referred the Pharisees to an interaction between David and the priest of Nob.
Let us read from Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 through 4.
Matthew chapter 12, verse 1. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to pick some heads of grain and eat them.
Matthew chapter 12, verse 2. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath."
Before we proceed with the reading from Matthew 12, let us digress to the book of Deuteronomy to see that it was lawful to pick grains with bare hands in another person's grain field.
Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 25. If you enter your neighbor's grain field, you may pick kernels with your hands, but you must not put a sickle to their standing grain.
The Pharisees did not challenge the disciple for picking grains from the grain field.
Instead, they argued that picking grains on the Sabbath was a violation of the Sabbath law.
Let us see how Jesus responded.
Matthew chapter 12 verse 3. He answered, haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry?
Matthew chapter 12 verse 4. He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priest.
To understand Christ's response, let us discuss the interaction between David and the priest of Nob using information from 1 Samuel chapter 21 verses 1 through 6. The events occurred during David's final escape from Saul's service. He met with Ahimelech, the priest of Nob.
David requested food from Ahimelech to take with him on an undisclosed mission.
Ahimelech offered to David the leftover consecrated bread.
The leftover consecrated bread belongs to the priest, based on Leviticus chapter 24 verses 8 to 9.
However, Ahimelech provided the bread to David.
He was motivated by care to provide food assistance to David. Also, he determined that he could give the bread without violating the religious custom regarding consumption of such bread.
Therefore, Christ's reference to the interaction conveys a message that the disciple could pick and eat grains from the field on the Sabbath without violating the Sabbath law.
The interaction between David and the priest of Nob is in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 21 verses 3 to 6.
In addition to the example regarding David, Christ also explained that the Sabbath law was intended to serve the need of people.
But people are not made for the Sabbath law.
First, we read Christ's response from Mark chapter 2 verses 27 to 28.
Then, we examine the explanation of the Sabbath law from Exodus chapter 23 verse 12 to understand his response.
Mark chapter 2 verse 27. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
Mark chapter 2 verse 28. So the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath.
Through these two verses, Christ tells us to understand the context of the Sabbath law in order to understand how the law applies in specific circumstances.
The Sabbath law or commandment is in Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 to 10.
However, let us look at the explanation of the law from Exodus chapter 23 verse 12.
Exodus chapter 23 verse 12. 6 days do your work, but on the seventh day do not work, so that your ox and your donkey may rest.
And so that the slave born in your household and the foreigner living among you may be refreshed.
This verse explains that the purpose of the Sabbath law is to set aside a day of rest so that the people and beasts of burden that provide household labor could rest and be refreshed for the next days of work.
Therefore, the spirit of the law is not violated in any way by the disciples picking grains from a grain field to assuage their hunger.
The Sabbath law is not violated by providing goods or service on the Sabbath to alleviate the need in a call to compassion.
As an example, the law is not violated by picking and eating from a grain field on the Sabbath.
Also, the law is not violated by healing the sick on the Sabbath.
However, declining a call to compassion, even on the Sabbath, would violate the principle of living in the image of God.
Let's look at an example of healing on the Sabbath, based on Matthew chapter 12, verses 9 through 13.
Jesus healed a man with shriveled hand in the synagogue on the Sabbath.
Before the healing, the Pharisees asked if it was lawful to heal on the Sabbath.
Jesus explained that healing is an act of compassion.
Also, healing provides a positive message regarding human relationship with God.
He explained that doing good on the Sabbath does not violate the Sabbath law.
Let's recognize two categories of activity regarding human responsibility in a call to compassion.
The first category is the procurement of goods or service.
Generally, the procurement of goods or service is subject to laws, customs, and regulations.
For example, a person that wants to raise money or goods or service for charity or any purpose must obey the applicable laws, customs, and regulations.
The second category is providing the procured goods or service to alleviate the need.
Such activity is an act of compassion and should not be prevented by any law, custom, or regulation.
For example, there should be no law, custom, or regulation to prevent a person from providing food to refugees. That is, no law, custom, or regulation against humanitarian assistance. What did we learn in this Bible study?
There should be no law, custom, or regulation against providing goods or service to alleviate the need in a call to compassion.
We distinguish between the procurement of goods or service and providing procured goods or service to alleviate the need.
Generally, the procurement of goods or service could be subject to laws, customs, and regulations.
In contrast, there should be no law, custom, or regulation to prevent a person from providing procured goods or service to alleviate the need.
We discussed an example of disciples picking and eating grains from a grain field on the Sabbath.
And another example of Jesus healing the sick on the Sabbath.
Please join us again in our continued discussion of living in the image of God.
Thank you.
God bless you.